Donald Trump wants to gerrymander the hell out of Texas, but Beto O'Rourke is leading the charge to turn the state blue. He's a former U.S. representative and the leader of one of the largest grassroots movements in Texas, with years of experience mobilizing voters in every corner of the state. And today, he's here to expose how Republicans are trying to steal the midterm elections and what he is going to do to stop them. By the end of this conversation, you'll know why Texas could be the tipping point for American democracy. But before we get into any of that, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay informed about how you can defend democracy. Beto O'Rourke, welcome back to Defending Democracy.
Mark, it's good to be with you. Thank you for having me.
All right, so it seems like Texas is once again at the center of the political universe, and there is no one who I wanted to speak to more about this than you, because you know this state literally from one corner to another, to another, to another. You're going to tell me there are more corners than that. But let's start with kind of the big picture, which is, I was thinking about this in advance of you coming on, how long we have been told that Texas is on the verge of becoming a swing and purple state. And it keeps teasing us that it's there, and then it sort of takes a step back. Give us just sort of a sense of how you view the politics of the state at a macro level, and then we're going to drill in.
Yeah. So, I think when a lot of people outside of Texas look at Texas, they see an example of extremism, the most obscene abortion law in America, for example, that is directly connected to this god-awful maternal mortality crisis we have. The school shootings like those at Santa Fe High School or Uvalde, and the fact that nothing has changed to make those shootings any less likely. And in fact, Texas leads the country in school shootings right now. A $7.25 an hour minimum wage, or the least insured population in America, meaning that we lead the country in childhood diabetes deaths. None of those things that I just described are popular. It's not what the majority of people in Texas want. And yet, when you have decimated democracy in this state, which is exactly what's happened, certainly ever since, Citizens United or Shelby versus Holder was passed, these are the results that you get. This is the consequence, the wages of our failure to defend, protect, and grow democracy in Texas, and instead be governed by something, I don't know what you call it. It's not outright authoritarianism, but it certainly isn't self-government of, by, and for the people. And so what I want folks to know is that regardless of the outcomes in these elections, I am confident, because I've been to all the corners, I've been to the 254 counties of Texas, that we are a people who want something much better than what you see right now. Of course, we are the people who produced Lyndon Baines Johnson, who signed the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And he did that because he was listening to people in places like Texas or Selma, Alabama, or Mississippi or Louisiana, or these other places where folks lived in something less than a democracy under the rule of the elected and armed thugs of Jim Crow pre-1964 in 1965. We are capable of really extraordinary things. The three young women who won Roe versus Wade in 1973 came from the state of Texas. So that's who we are at our best. We also possess 40 electoral college votes after the next census. Mark, you might have a better read on this, but will it be 43? Will it be 44 electoral college votes? In other words, Democrat or Republican presidential nominee, you will not get to the White House without winning Texas. So whether or not Texas is going to flip in 26 or 28 or 2030 is really immaterial. If you cannot win Texas, it's not a matter of if, it is a matter of you must win this state if you are going to hold political power in America. And so this project that so many millions of us have been a part of registering voters, of helping them navigate these onerous anti-democratic voting laws to actually cast that ballot at the polling place, is the most important work that I can think of. And it's why our organization, Powered by People, has been doing this work for the last 6 years. And it is certainly why we are under attack right now by the Attorney General, Ken Paxton, right here in the state of Texas.
Yeah, so I'm going to want to unpack a number of pieces of that, but I want to start with the sort of where you start, which is the the relentless attacks on democracy by the Republican leadership of the state of Texas. I mean, what people don't realize is just how oppressive Republicans have been in the area of voting rights and free and fair elections. And it's easy to go back and look at SB1, which was the big voter suppression bill they passed in 2021. But honestly, that is just one of a series of anti-voting measures that they have taken, and I could go on and list them. And I'm sure you have an even longer list. But one of them that I always find remarkable, that people outside of the state of Texas find incomprehensible, is that to register people to vote in Texas itself is a process of registration. Most everywhere else in America, if you want to register people to vote, you register them to vote. If you are in Fairfax County, Virginia, and you want to go to Arlington County, Virginia to register to vote, like, God bless you. And that is true, by the way, even in in many of the Jim Crow states. But Texas has found unique ways to even make it harder to register people to vote. So can you just give people a sense of what that is? Because, like I said, it will shock people's conscience.
Yeah, in the year 2025, in the state of Texas, you cannot register to vote online. There's no automatic voter registration, and there's certainly not same-day voter registration. If you turn 18 and want to register to vote, and let's say you don't have a driver's license and you don't go to the DMV, you've got to either walk down to the county registrar at the county courthouse, the county seat of whatever county you live in, and there are 254 of them, or you must print out a voter registration form if you have a printer, and a lot of 18-year-olds today don't. Then you've got to fill that out, and you've got to follow this really prescriptive process in order to do it. You have to have an envelope, you have to find a stamp, you have to send that in, and then 30 days later, you've got to hold the state Secretary of State accountable for sending you your voter registration card and bird dog that through the entire process. Therefore, there are a lot of really wonderful people in the state of Texas who voluntarily get certified as volunteer deputy registrars, VDRs. They go down to the courthouse, they take a test, they pass the test, they get certified, and now they're street legal to register anyone who's eligible, but Mark, to your point, only in the county where they are certified. So I'm certified in El Paso County, but I'm not certified in the other 253 counties. So I can't do this work anywhere else in Texas unless I go to that county courthouse, meet that county registrar, get certified there, pass their test, am sworn in and deputized, and then I can hit the streets there. And if someone from another county is in El Paso and doesn't live in this county and won't vote in this county, I cannot register them under penalty of criminal law, right? So they make this so intimidating and onerous and criminally prosecutable because they want to keep people from registering. And that, Mark, explains why so many millions of Texans don't get registered. It's not because they're lazy. They don't lack any love for this great democracy. They care about all those issues that I brought up at the beginning of our conversation, but they're understandably intimidated by the process. And so it takes those of us willing to do the work to meet them where they are, often on college or high school campuses, union halls, cafes, bars, wherever people congregate, and to work through that registration process with them, help them to get registered. And then, because this is the toughest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot, we help them navigate the process to present the correct form of voter ID, to know where their early voting location is, and also to understand the ballot as it is written in Texas. And our group, Powered by People, has been doing that kind of work for now more than 5 years. And we find ourselves under attack by the Attorney General at the same time that the Republican Governor Greg Abbott and the Republican majority legislature have just redrawn 5 congressional districts at the behest of Donald Trump, who literally said, find me 5 new congressional seats in Texas, not, hey, I think these districts are unconstitutional or they're unrepresentative of the electorate in the state of Texas. He's just boldly in the light of day saying, I need more political power, and this is where I can find it. And because they fear those of us who are working against this theft of power and representation in Texas, they're trying to put us out of business. And literally, Mark, the Attorney General is threatening to put me into jail for
Right.
doing this work in the state of Texas right now.
And I want to talk about that in a second, but I got to do one more thing on voting process because again, I think it is hard for people outside of Texas to realize just how repressive Republicans have tried to make it to register to vote and to vote. And so one of the stories I tell, and maybe you can add to this or not, is Harris County went out of its way during the pandemic to really try to do creative things to make it easier for people to vote, like make it easier for everybody to vote. And so they did this process where essentially people could drive up in their cars and cast their ballot. And it was very, very popular. It extended hours, as I recall. And the Republicans didn't just shut that down, didn't just say you can't do this in future elections. As I recall, they actually passed a law to essentially take over or to change, to single out Harris County for treatment about how they run their elections or their ability to run their elections. And so like it just feels like Greg Abbott and the Republican legislature are like looking to find ways to to undo any reforms, undo ways that Harris County, which is Houston, might try to make voting easier, to punish Democratic jurisdictions because Harris County has an overwhelming number of Democratic voters. And am I right that that is just like the mindset of Greg Abbott and the Republican legislature?
Absolutely. We talked about Shelby versus Holder in 2013, which decimated the Voting Rights Act, no longer required pre-clearance when those in power, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, try to change the rules of elections while elections are taking place. And you know this, Mark, your listeners and viewers might not, but literally within minutes, this is not an exaggeration, Texas changed its voter ID laws to make it the toughest in the nation. So you could, going forward after 2013, use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at a polling place, but you could no longer use your student ID at the University of Texas at Austin or El Paso or Dallas or anywhere else in the state to do the same. In addition, more than 700 polling places were closed down in the fastest growing state in the union. That's far and away more than any other state in America. And almost every single one of those closures took place in a fast growing Black or brown neighborhood. And then to your point, in 2020, in the midst of the deadliest pandemic in American history, where communities like mine in El Paso had morgues that were full to overflowing, we were renting mobile morgues because so many people were dying so quickly. The governor and the state legislature passed a law that you could only have one ballot drop-off box per county, whether you're a county of 9,000 people or whether you're a county like Harris County of 5 million people. And it's not a coincidence that not only is Harris County a Democratic majority county, it is the most diverse county in the United States of America. So that is exactly why they're doing this, putting people in harm's way in order to hold on to political power. And you have racial gerrymandering on top of that. You have every manner of voter intimidation and suppression. That election law that you mentioned now allows so-called poll watchers, which are a vestige of pre-Voting Rights Act, concerned citizen councils that really patrolled Black majority polling areas to intimidate and keep people from casting a ballot and having their vote counted and their voice heard. That is back in full effect in the state of Texas right now. So I want everyone to understand that if the outcomes of our elections are incomprehensible to you, this helps you to understand why we have the outcomes that we do right now. It is not that Ted Cruz and Greg Abbott and abortion bans and a $7.25 an hour minimum wage are popular. It is because so many millions of Texans are literally locked out of participating in the franchise today.
All right. We got to talk redistricting. I said I wanted to get the voting, I wanted people to understand the context of why, as you say, that you wind up with, some of the crazy politician Ken Paxton being perhaps the craziest of the crazies. Although you may tell me I'm underestimating some of the other Republicans in the state. But what has captured the national attention has been, as you say, Donald Trump's demand that Texas find him 5 more seats, and the willingness of Texas Republicans at Greg Abbott's urging, but the Republican legislature in doing just that. And the thing I want to say at the outset to sort of set the table for the viewers and for the listeners is Texas was already a extremely gerrymandered state. I mean, what people need to realize is Texas gained, I think it was 4 seats after the 2010 cycle, and all of them were the results of Hispanic population growth. And then they gained more seats after the 2020 census, and that was also largely as a result of Hispanic population growth, although some, I think, also African American growth. But really not because the Anglo population was what was getting them this. And each time the Republican legislature found a way to essentially create more white Republican districts, right? And it is an absolute travesty for democracy that cycle after cycle, decade after decade, Republicans in Texas keep doing this. So Texas is already being sued in 2021. I know because my law firm is one of the people who brought the lawsuits, because their current maps are an abomination. And yet, on top of that, they have now passed a even worse gerrymander. So I think people need to realize that this is not like Donald Trump came to a place with like fair maps and said, okay, make them a gerrymander. He came to a place with illegal, gerrymandered, racially discriminatory maps and said, please do better than that. And so that is the backdrop to this. And I want you to talk about, because you do know the state so well, what this means for the people of Texas, what this means for democracy in Texas.
Yeah, so you no longer have a competition of ideas and values and track record and vision. And at our best, that's what a democracy is about. I want to compete against Republicans on a level playing field. I mean, they've got some powerful ideas. Democrats have some powerful ideas. Let's contest those in the public arena and then give voters the opportunity, whether that voter is white or black or Hispanic, is a fifth generation Texan, or just gained their citizenship 5 months ago. Doesn't matter. No me importa. Let's put it out there and let the voters decide. That's the idea, right? And we are so far removed from that in the state of Texas. And we are a bellwether. This will be your future, America, unless we vigorously contest this power grab, and over the 14 months to come, do everything we can to win back political power, at a minimum, a majority in the United States House of Representatives, to check this lawlessness, these attacks on the Constitution, this open corruption that we see in the White House and in Texas, in Austin, in the state legislature, and in the governor's mansion. But Mark, one really important point that I want to make that gives us a little bit of hope, because this power grab and this abuse of these positions of public trust, it's jaw-dropping, and it can be really intimidating. And I understand that. But they would not be doing this unless they were panicking and scared about their ability to maintain their purchase on power. Donald Trump knows how extraordinarily unpopular he is personally, how unpopular the so-called big beautiful bill, the sending nearly $1 trillion to the wealthiest 1% that comes from working Americans, adding trillions of dollars to the debt, cutting Medicaid, reducing the VA by 83,000 positions, making it harder for veterans, those Americans who put their lives on the line for this country, to get the service and the support that they were guaranteed when they enlisted and signed up and put their lives on the line for America. This stuff is not selling well in America, and he will lose the House of Representatives unless he takes these extraordinary measures. Hence, Governor Abbott, I need 5 seats. And Governor Abbott, unlike Governor Kemp in 2020, when Trump calls him and says, hey, I need to find this many votes so I can hold on to power, they say, no way. We may be in the same party. I may have voted for you, but I believe in this Constitution, and that's a step too far. In Texas, it was, can we get this to you in August? And they did. And so now the task
And didn't they also pass over solving real problems in Texas? I've heard this, that like they didn't deal with flood, like they dealt with this rather than flood relief, right?
Yeah, you had one of the worst tragedies in Texas history in July, when these floods ravaged Kerr County and Hill Country in Texas. And ostensibly, there was a special session called to address this, but the governor literally put flood relief and early warning systems and stormwater detection on the back burner. And in addition, he had the power unilaterally as the executive in the state to get these things done anyway, and instead moved redistricting to the front of this. And I think most of your listeners and viewers understand this because they listen and follow you. But it is important to remind ourselves that mid-decade redistricting is a total anomaly, not just in the state of Texas, but in the United States of America. This is supposed to happen once every decade after we count the population growth in our given states and reapportion accordingly. The only reason it happens mid-decade is when you have a blatant power grab like the one that we have right now. But again, I think this is born out of panic and it is born out of fear. You know, we helped those who broke quorum in Texas trying to
Yeah.
defy the governor's attempt to redraw or rewrite our election laws in 2021. We raised $600,000 to support Democrats in the fight. Not a finger was lifted by the other side, not a note of complaint. We do the same thing in 2025 when Democrats try to break quorum to stop this redrawing, this power grab in Texas. And our organization is out more than $400,000 in legal fees defending ourselves in courts in Tarrant County and El Paso County, the 15th District, the Texas Supreme Court. Ken Paxton tweeting on X that he's going to put me in jail and lock me up, froze our assets in the state of Texas, threatened to freeze my personal assets here. I mean, they're going to war against us, but we wear this as a badge of honor because it means we're doing the right thing. It means that they fear us. It means that they're desperate right now to hold on to power because they realize it is slipping from their grasp. So my thanks to you, everyone who supports the work that you're doing, everyone in Texas who's out there hustling regardless of this power grab, and to people like Gavin Newsom in California who have decided they're going to meet fire with fire, though no one likes politicians redrawing congressional districts to their own advantage. If we just sit back and complain all the way to November of 2026, then this thing is over. And the consolidation of authoritarian power in the hands of the president, I believe, will be unstoppable. So right now, it falls to us to do all we can with what we have, wherever we are, Texas, California, Illinois, Maryland, wherever we have the ability to fight back, we absolutely must. And not just fight back for the sake of it, but fight back to win.
Yeah. And look, this is, again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because right now, I'm angry. I'm angry at the Republicans. I'm angry at Donald Trump. I am furious at what is going on. But I'm also angry at how few people are willing to step forward. When Joe Biden was in office, it was easy to say I'm pro-democracy, right? Like it's easy to say you're willing to do everything when Joe Biden is in power and Democrats control the Senate and the House. But you're under real attack. Like what you're saying is absolutely accurate. And I can tell everyone in the audience when there was a need for courage in the state of Texas around the efforts to deny quorum in the legislative session. A whole lot of the people who claimed that they were 100% for democracy, they became very quiet people. I mean, you probably couldn't find them. I couldn't find them. And what you did, and everyone needs to know this, what Beto O'Rourke did was he stepped forward. He said, I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm not going to become one of these people who can just, sort of take a pass on this. I can tweet, I can give some speeches, but I'm otherwise going to sort of disappear in this moment, and then I'll reemerge when things are safe. Instead, you ran into the fire, and you did everything you can when democracy was at stake, and you still are. I mean, you're still doing it around the country. But I think I hope you understand how many millions of people are in your corner and know what you have sacrificed and given for this fight. And I'm wondering because I get asked this question, and I'm wondering, like, are you afraid? Are you defiant? Like, are you angry that more people are not standing up with you? Because I think you're one of the real heroes of frankly, this time when we don't have a lot of them. I'll be right back with more of my conversation with Beto O'Rourke in a moment. But, I founded Democracy Docket in 2020 to fight for free and fair elections and to help keep you informed. And now that Republicans in Texas are gerrymandering voters out of their voice, it is more important than ever to stay up to date on the redistricting battles and support the work of Democracy Docket. So please become a premium member now at the link above or in the description below. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified whenever we post a new video.
I'll tell you, I think as we witness the centers of conventional power, I think of the big law firms, I think of the big Ivy League schools, I think of the big media companies like Paramount and CBS, I think of the big social media titans like Mark Zuckerberg, or the billionaires like Jeff Bezos, each of them throwing their lot in with Donald Trump, not only not fighting back, but bending the knee and bowing to him. To see these Texas Democrats, these state legislators risk arrest, risk having their offices vacated, being thrown out of office, which, as you know, Greg Abbott petitioned the Texas Supreme Court to do. Abbott was threatening with charging them with second-degree felonies. I mean, these are folks who make $7,000 a year as citizen legislators in the state of Texas, who are being fined $500 a day for having the courage of their convictions. I was just so inspired by their willingness in the place that you least expect to find it, right? I mean, this is not supposed to be a hotbed of progressive, liberal, small d democratic activism. And yet this is where we found our heroes and these Democratic state legislators in the state of Texas. So to be able to fight right alongside them and to support the work that they are doing, and millions of others, not just in Texas, but around the country, who are standing up right now and doing everything that they can wherever they are with whatever they've got. I mean, I feel, and I know you feel this way too, because I follow your work and right back at you, everything you just said about us. It's a real honor to be alive right now, because, I mean, how many generations going back 249 years have had the opportunity to fight for America when literally everything was on the line? I mean, those who fought back the mightiest empire on the planet to win our independence, to ensure that we'll never bow or bend the knee to a king again. Those who defeated the Confederacy at extraordinary loss. Those who pushed for the 14th Amendment. Those who risked their lives, lost their lives for that Civil Rights Act and Voting Rights Act that we described. I mean, those alive today have inherited all that service, all that struggle, all that sacrifice. And what we do with it is going to define us, just as it defined every generation before us. And we're either, in Lincoln's words, going to meanly lose it or nobly save the last best hope of earth. And so, thank God we live in this country, and thank God we still have time to fight. But important that we all recognize that the hour is late, and these 14 months are all that stand between us and what I believe will be certain authoritarian control by Donald Trump and his partisans, unless we win real political power. And there will be no grades for effort, right? There will be no grades for courage. It will only matter what we are able to achieve. And I see people, Mark, you were talking about, those who've taken a pass and those who are waiting and watching and will come out when it's safe. I am seeing people right now, Governor Pritzker, Governor Newsom, you, and those who work with you, and then everyday Americans whose names we'll never know, whose songs will never be sung, who are doing what they can in their own personal capacity. That gives me so much hope right now. We got to build on that. It's RFK Sr., RFK the Good, who talked about those ripples of hope that converge into that mighty current that can break down those walls of oppression. I mean, that's what we are doing today. And, just like you and I talking right now, reaching all these folks who watch you, I mean, we're sending out those ripples, and hopefully we're inspiring one another, and we're taking courage in each other's example, and then going out there and fighting these bastards until we win with all that we've got, with every day between now and those elections in November of 26. And then after we win them, we keep fighting.
So I got to ask you a question based on your history. So I remember when you were in Congress. You were once a member of Congress from Texas, and one of the peculiar features of American politics right now that the founders could never have envisioned is the absolute surrender by the congressional majority, in this case Mike Johnson and his MAGA caucus, of their constitutional rights and prerogatives. Like, it used to be that even, speakers of the same party, they would bristle if the president got too far into what they viewed as their business. And there seems to be literally nothing that Mike Johnson and his caucus will stand up to Donald Trump on. I mean, nothing. There's no prerogative. There's no tax policy, taxes, spending, the budget, elections, like whatever. Like they are totally, have bowed down and suffer, and surrendered all their dignity. And I assume you keep up a little bit with some of your former colleagues. You know some of these personalities. I know you haven't been there in a little bit, but what do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, you centered the question in the founders and what they would or would not be able to envision, and obviously, so much work and thought and debate went into ensuring that you really had a separation and a balance of power in this country, because they recognize they just literally, at the cost of untold lives, won their independence from an empire and a king, and they wanted to make sure that never happened again in America. And so separating these powers through these three branches of government was absolutely essential to this project. And I would argue that it has been critical to our success as a country. Whatever challenges we have, we're still the greatest thing going. And we really are the exception on the world stage today, and certainly over the course of human history. There's never been something so powerful, so magical, so meaningful as America. It's the reason you and I are talking, and why we spend every second we've got fighting for this country to make sure that we really realize that promise and that potential. And to see Trump defy both branches of government, right? Decisions made by federal judges, absolutely ignoring them. And then on the other side, dismantling and destroying congressionally chartered, mandated, appropriated, and funded agencies, whether it's USAID or departments like the Department of Education, and to see the congressional majority like not even whimper
Right,
in protest. Like,
right.
how much more do you need, Mr. President? It was frankly, Mark, it was one of the things that I found to be so disappointing in our party, in my party's response, the Democratic Party's response, during the continuing resolution debate at the beginning of this year. At the start of the presidency, you had Doge under Elon Musk doing everything that I've just described, including, retrieving all of our private, privileged, personal Social Security data and sharing it with God literally only knows whom. And they were asking for a blank check to continue to fund the government with no accountability or responsibility for what they had done. And one of the few powers that the minority party has is found in its unity and its leverage at being able to block bad things. And for whatever reason, the Democratic Senate leadership chose not to do that. And I really think we needed to stand and fight, because to your point, the Republican majority is absolutely not going to do it. They've abnegated their role, and they're fully thrown in with Donald Trump, whatever he wants to do. No oversight for sure, but also just freely giving up their powers, including the power to tariff, which is explicitly
Which is the
described and
taxing
defined in
thing,
the
right? Yeah.
Constitution. The Supreme Court is going to soon rule on that. Let's see which way they go. So if I'm looking for hope, given what Republicans are doing, and frankly, given what the Democratic leadership in the Senate did, it is that we will win elections in 2026, a majority in the House. I mean, who knows? Maybe we knock off John Cornyn, or if Ken Paxton is the nominee for Senate in Texas. I think it's possible. I don't know if it is probable, but in 2026, in the midterm for the president whose party is in power, I think anything is possible, especially with his record low approval numbers. Sherrod Brown winning the Senate seat in Ohio. I mean, we really could pick up political power. But the lesson I hope that we have learned, and you kind of alluded to this, we had the House, the Senate, and the White House in 2021. We could have passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act so that you and I would not be having to have
Yes.
this conversation right now. We did not use that power for all that it was worth. When we gain power again, I heard this from Mandela Barnes in Milwaukee when we were doing an event together earlier in the year. He said, we've got to drive that car like we stole it. We've got to run the tables on them democratically, peacefully, constitutionally, within the rule of law, but all the same, use that power for all that it's worth. But first, we've got to win it. And that means fighting on every front. Yes, in the obvious places, these 5 new congressional districts that I hope are going to be drawn in California, fighting for these 5 districts drawn in Texas, conceding nothing, but picking up Oklahoma 5 in Oklahoma City, picking up the Omaha district that Don Bacon is retiring from in Nebraska, going to these so-called red states that have been written off and underinvested in by the National Democratic Party, and fighting with all we've got to make sure that we field the best candidates, support them, fund them, register voters for them, turn them out, and win those elections and win back some political power so that we can use it.
Okay, so I can't let you go without asking you about what you just said, but about the state of Texas. So lots of political confusion, prognostication, maybe a little bit of both, about like what is the state of House elections, U.S. congressional elections in Texas. Let's assume the 5 seats stay. We're fighting in court and we're fighting like hell to get them back. But let's just say we wind up with the map. Um, did we see in 2024 something irreversible in, I guess it was the Rio Grande Valley where Democrats lost some ground in congressional seats? Is that reversible? Are these 5 seats that have now been essentially stolen and rigged, are any of them competitive? Has it caused any vulnerabilities elsewhere? Like what do you tell a national audience how to think about that? You're also welcome to address, if you'd like, the Senate race. You mentioned there's a contested primary between John Cornyn, the incumbent Republican, and Ken Paxton, the challenger, who is a complete lunatic, but who may be favored in a race. I don't know. Like, give us the insider take on Texas federal elections for
Yeah.
2026.
Yeah, so undoubtedly a challenging place to contest if you're a Democrat, in large part because the game has been so rigged in favor of the Republicans who've held power now in the state for more than 30 years. The last time, for those who don't know this, the last time a Democrat won a statewide election in Texas was 1994. Last time they won a governor's race was 1990. Last time they won a Senate race is 1988. And there is some fault to be shared by Democrats for that. And I'll tell you, in 2022, 2024, I don't know that we saw enough of these congressional candidates and state house candidates literally going door to door, neighborhood to neighborhood, and listening to those that they wanted to serve and represent and fight for in these positions of power and public trust, and doing it in an honest, authentic way that wasn't fabricated out of some laboratory in Washington, D.C. by some consultant who's probably never visited these districts. And on the other side, I will tell you that Republicans in South Texas, this is Hidalgo County and Cameron County and Eagle Pass and Del Rio, the kind of places that so much ink has been spilled about, they were hungry. They were showing up. They were fighting. They were putting out a really compelling vision about jobs, about economic growth, about freedom. And Democrats who had won these districts, Mark, literally for more than a century, were so goddamn complacent, resting on their laurels, assuming that things would just flow out of inertia. And they just don't. You got to win those voters. You got to earn their trust. And so, we got our ass kicked, and maybe Democrats deserve to have their ass kicked, but maybe the silver lining in this story is that it woke us up. And it showed that if you want to win, you've got to earn it, and you got to fight for it, and you got to go door to door, and you got to register these voters, and you got to stay in touch with them, and you got to listen to them, and you've got to reflect back what you're hearing and learning from them in the campaign that you run. And I'm confident that if we do that, whether it is in South Texas or if we're unsuccessful in the courts and these districts, these 5 congressional districts are redrawn, we contest, we fight there. We also fight in pre-existing Republican represented districts that have had to bleed Republican voters to create these new gerrymandered districts and therefore are more vulnerable. We can win there as well. We got to do this from a place of confidence and realize that this power grab on the part of Republicans is coming from a place of panic and fear. What they are doing is so deeply unpopular right now. What we stand for, raising the minimum wage, expanding access to healthcare, treating people with just basic fucking dignity and respect in their lives, whoever they are, whatever they believe in, whatever party they voted for last time, that is the way that we win. But the only way we do that is by showing up, being there in person, and showing folks who we are. Now, it's tough to do. It's not easy. You can't solve that through money. It requires a lot of sweat, equity, and labor on the part of the candidate. but I'm confident that that is the way to win back political power. So, Mark, I am optimistic. And I think if Democrats will run campaigns in the way that I just described, whether it's for the House, the state House, or yes, the US Senate, we have a real shot in 2026 at winning. We saw what was possible in 2018. Not only did I get so close to Ted Cruz in a Trump midterm year, but we won 12 state House seats. Colin Allred defeated Pete Sessions. He had no business beating this entrenched, well-funded incumbent Republican, and yet he did it. Lizzie Panel Fletcher did it in Southeast Texas. We won 17 judicial positions in Harris County alone. So this kind of thing can be done because it has been done before against even more trying circumstances. So don't sleep on Texas. Get involved in this state. It really is the bellwether for the rest of the country, and I think will decide the future, the fortune, the fate of America. So this is the epicenter of everything that matters right now.
All right. So my last question for you. One of the biggest questions that I get, and I am sure you get this question everywhere you go, and it is from people in red districts that are very red and places that are very blue, is they say, look, I am overwhelmed by all of this. But I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I am paralyzed. I'm scrolling social media. I am watching Beto O'Rourke. I'm watching you, Mark Elias. But like, what can I actually do to help? And you lead a massive grassroots organization, so I assume you get this question all the time. Like, what can individual citizens who are not a Beto O'Rourke, right? They don't have your platform. What can they do to help in this fight for democracy?
Yeah, it's so important that we not give into the temptation to despair and to assume that what is rolling through this country is inevitable, and will continue to roll through, that Trump and the Republicans and the MAGA movement are all powerful. That is certainly what they're trying to convey. That is certainly what they want us to believe. Everything they do is in an effort to spread the dispirit and despair that so many of us are tempted to feel. But the reason they're doing all of this is because they really fear the power that each of us have individually. And that power is not just found by Democrats in Massachusetts and in California. And sometimes I pity the Democrats in those states because I wonder what they wake up ready to fight each day. Because in Texas, it's always clear to us, right? We always know what the battle ahead is, even if it seems at times unwinnable to some. We know what we're fighting for, what we're fighting against, and what we have to do in order to win. But even within Texas, it's not just in Austin, which is traditionally thought to be liberal or progressive, or El Paso or San Antonio or Dallas or Houston. It is in Lubbock. It is in Amarillo. It is in Snyder, Texas. It is in every single one of these communities, no matter how urban, no matter how remote, how rural. When you showed up, whoever you are out there, to the hands-off protests or the No Kings rallies, including in these rural counties, what you did broke through. If you think about it, Trump has, Elon Musk and the X platform. He has Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. He's cowed these media companies, including CBS and 60 Minutes, and the decision to throw Stephen Colbert off the air. And yet his polling numbers continue to plummet because when they see you show up, especially in these so-called red and more removed and remote places, with your signs, reminding people that they're cutting jobs at the VA, that they're sharing our private Social Security number, that they're cutting Medicaid at a time that people are struggling to be able to see a doctor, that they're fighting everyday Americans and taking their wealth and transferring it to literally the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet. That stuff is breaking through, and it's changing sentiment and perception and polling and possibilities in this country. Abraham Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, nothing can fail. Without it, nothing can succeed. You are changing public sentiment right now. So if you see a protest, show up for it. If you don't see a protest, you organize it and you encourage your friends and families to show up for it. If you're wondering, hey, I live in this very red county in Texas, my vote is not going to change who the county judge is or the justice of the peace. Why should I even vote? I'll tell you what, we may just win that county judge or justice of the peace race, but even if we don't, your vote will carry up all the way to the congressional district. It will carry all the way up to the Senate race, to the governor's race. Enough of those votes come through, and we could shock the country and change the world by what happens in Texas. So do not at all think that you don't have power or that their power is greater than ours. We've just got to use it. We got to believe in ourselves and resist that temptation to despair.
Beto O'Rourke, there's a good reason why you are a hero for so many in the fight for democracy, including one of my heroes. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Mark. You are mine. We're grateful for you.